Hey guys, welcome to the Secret Spirits and Others. I'm John and I'm here with Phil and Chris. And unfortunately, I wasn't able to join you guys last time, but you had a very interesting dialogue, and word on the street is that it may be relevant to something that's coming up in the future. What do you think about that?
I don't know. So
Sounds pretty interesting to
hear
me.
what we hear, right? But yeah, today is an exciting episode. I think we're going to do our Montreal episode finally that we've been hinting at for over a week. Should be an interesting discussion just because John's been working on it forever. I'm working on it for some time. Chris just got into it and loves it.
I'm the token Canadian. Like, you can't have a Montreal episode without a Canadian, right?
Two of them, except one of them doesn't believe it.
I guess I've been here for 15 years. I don't know. I don't know that I can say I'm part Canadian yet.
Dude, in the old episode,
I'm not nice enough
about driving through Montreal looking for the leg eater. I mean, you're from Montreal.
Oh, wow. I mean, I've been here a while. I still remember that day. It's crazy. That Ravel 07 guy like drops into Q4T, puts up a perfect image match, and doesn't say a damn thing about where it is.
That's my dream.
Except for it's in Montreal somewhere. And so I'm like, well, we're not doing anything. We may as well go explore the city for a while, you know?
That's amazing. But yeah, Montreal, I like it. I went there for one job. I get to travel for work. I've been to most of the secret cities, and that's where I met John. We met up in Montreal, looked at the leg eater for a while, and drank a bunch of beers. And it was a good time. So yeah, where should we start? I think we want to touch on the image briefly. It's pretty self-explanatory. John's got some deeper image stuff that's pretty cool, but who knows?
You can see all of it behind me, right? I mean, I think this image, this image it's not my favorite image. It's dull, it's drab, it's a little bit boring compared to some of the others, but I think there's some really obvious stuff that when you notice it, it pops out at you. You know, the mouth matching the city of Montreal from a map perspective. It feels good to me. You know, a lot of people argue it's not perfect. It's not the state of Ohio in the Cleveland image, but I mean, could you do that with the mouth?
Nothing really is. So. And I think that's a point that I like to make too, is whenever I go to Montreal on Google Maps and it does that little like zoom out, zoom in thing, the first thing I think is, oh shit, it does look like the image. And then I pull up the image and I like scrutinize them and I'm like, man, I don't know. But I feel like that initial impression really is important to it, in just that I'm just like, yeah, that harkens. And I think a lot of his image matches are more that than an exact match.
Yeah, it blends into the art, right? And
yeah,
you know, it's not easy to do. If you made it too perfect, it would stick out like a sore thumb. And you know, if you blended it too much, it'd probably never be found. But I think
every
it's a
other
good
image match.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, absolutely. But you know, we obviously have coordinates in the image. You know, I see 73. I argue the runes are a 74 reversed. I mean, we have 45 and 46. We're only missing 74. It's a pretty good match for 74 if you flip them around. I don't understand the issue that everyone has with that, but to each their own, right?
And even so, I'm good with 73-45 alone. I mean, that gets you pretty damn close. But yeah, I mean, I think you filled in the gaps nicely.
Yeah, totally. And then obviously, I think most people see this, but I'm hesitant to say that. The more and more people we see come into these puzzles, the face is very similar in a caricature perspective to the first Prime Minister, John McDonnell. Do you guys agree with that, or you feel a little different?
Yeah, I'm 100%.
As a caricature, I can see it definitely, like a Mad Magazine style caricature.
And the hair, especially. Yeah. I mean, the hair is the main thing that tips me off to it. I mean, the guy has crazy hair. This thing has crazy hair. good enough. And the big
Yeah,
nose.
I agree.
I mean, yeah. Answer yes.
Yeah, the features are there, right? You know, the other thing that is really obvious and jumps out is the 67. And there's a lot of, I wouldn't say controversy, but controversy is the first word that comes to mind because so many people go that route and try and go out to the expo site and make it work there. And I've seen some stuff that's decent out that way, but I don't really believe in it. But if you think about that 67 in comparison to things like Terminal Tower, the Chicago Water Tower,
Mm-hmm.
you know, some of these like iconic buildings,
Yeah.
you know, the expo was so iconic for Montreal. I mean, it was just really important. It was the most successful expo there had ever been up until that point. And it brought a ton of people into the city and people were talking about it for a long time. So to me, that's just Montreal. Like,
and you're good with a double clue like that, where the 67 kind of also makes your 46, is it?
yeah. I mean, it makes sense to me if I look at it. You know, that 4 intersects with the 6.
Kind of a before and after,
67.
if you will, of 4067.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, I can see where it bother people. I just feel like everyone wants these puzzles to be so damn similar. You know, they want everything to be perfect, to work the same way as the last one. And you have to expect that there's going to be some differences or they would have just fallen like cards. And
I just point out though that
yeah,
this one does work exactly like Chicago, yet everyone disregards the perfect image match.
oh yeah, that's very true. That's very true. I mean, it's the start, right? You start at the leg eater.
Apparently.
Maybe.
And
Anyways.
I mean, you know, when you say it like that though, the Bowman wasn't the end. So, you know, there are things like that, but the Bowman's also enormous.
It is
Bowman
giant.
is not like oh, I'm on random cross street in Chicago and I found this thing. I guess I'll go over there.
Yeah. It's night and day. I mean, that lamp leg is literally the head's the size of my fist. So it's not on a main street. It's just too unusual, you know.
Not even something you see from across the street.
Yeah, you can barely see it from across the street. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember we met up and like we're walking down there and I'm like getting excited. I'm like, oh good, we're going to it. And then you're like, okay, we're here. And I'm like, oh shit, there.
You can walk right by it. And I think I had at least a few times because I know I'd been on Drummond for different things before that leg eater was found. So I'm definitely guilty of walking past it and never noticing it. But hey, good on the guy that did. And it really opened up the puzzles, you know. It secured Montreal as a spot as opposed to St. Louis. I mean, some people disagree with that, but you have to realize the person that I've seen work St. Louis the best, Johan, who got us to Cleveland and the Wall, when this image match was found, he looked for quite some time and then walked away.
He's like, I'm out.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, we're not image guys. So let's not talk about the image anymore.
Well, talk to me about this flower for a minute.
Okay, we'll talk about the flower.
Just for a minute, right? These flower petals they appear to be grouped 7, 3, 2, and then I don't know how many circles would you count in the middle?
Fuck, man.
8.
Am I do you want to look over my shoulder?
8. I give it 8. 8 circles.
Give it 8?
And a couple oblong boys.
Call me crazy, but if you were to turn those numbers into letters, you'd have H, G, C, B. You've got 8, 7, 3, 2. And the leg eater happens to be in H3G as the first part of the postal code for that section of Montreal. 8 dots, H, 3 flower petals, and then 7 more for a G, and then a 2 left over to do something else with.
You know, I was gonna make a joke about what are you drinking right now, but I mean, there are so many codes that are done via groupings that it's not as crazy as I want it to be.
If not that, I mean, something, it could definitely be something else, but it's odd. Why 732? What does
It's a pretty shitty looking
mean?
flower. Now, like the more I look at it, like I'm just like every other flower is nice, and this one's like, what the hell?
Yeah, there's some strange parts. If you look at the bottom of the flower, like go right from the 7, where that little V is, the bottom shouldn't connect there because that's space between 2 petals.
Yeah.
So why is that line running along the outside like that? It's like he needed the bottom line there for some reason.
Yeah, because he doesn't do that at the top. Like it's not like he tried to make it circular.
No, that's literally a space at the bottom. And he filled it. It's not a petal.
Yeah.
Oh, that's fucking weird.
I mean, I've got nothing from it. That's been weighing on my mind for years and years and years. That one space. All the rest of them are good. I mean, there's a reason the 67 is like that, but yeah, there's really no reason the other part is like that. So I think there's probably a bit more to this image that, you know, we haven't figured out. The St. Lawrence, I think that's a decent match in the collar.
I think that's definite. That one I feel is like, if you put them next to each other, it's good.
Yeah. Yeah, it looks legit to me.
Do you want to talk about your squares and segue into verse?
Ooh. I was gonna say that the squares or the pointing puzzle is the money.
Yeah. I mean, that pointing piece came about when I was actually working with John Michaels, and you know, we had looked at the hands forever, and you know, it started going into the conversation, well, you know, what are those fingers pointing to? You know, one's pointing directly to the leg eater and the other's pointing up at that grid. And I don't know what triggered it for me, but I know that we were on, you know, Golden Square Mile, you know, that had been mentioned forever. But at one point, I decided to look up the streets in the Square Mile because I was very conscious of the fact that, you know, the old Square Mile was different than the Golden Square Mile, which ended up being a bigger portion. You know, it was a bigger section of the city. So when I looked up those streets, there were literally I can't even remember how many it is now. So 9 streets, I believe it is. Mm-hmm. And if you insert them into the slots, you know, from west to east, which is how you would look at the map, right? Mm-hmm. The street that he's pointing to is Drummond. And for me, that's a tough thing to argue. You know, the one thing I'll say about it is everyone dislikes it because it's different from what we see in the other puzzles. And what I'm thinking is some of the stuff we're missing 40 years later is going to be different. That's why we're not finding it, right? The template that people are using, it's not complete. So I think, you know, as we talk through some of what's going on in Montreal, or what I believe is going on in Montreal, I'm getting the impression that some of the clues are slightly different than the other puzzles. And wouldn't you think they're going to change it up a little bit?
Of course, they're going to change it up again.
Yeah.
And but on the same
progression of difficulty.
And on the same scheme, like, I mean, the other puzzle that's clearly pointing is San Francisco. And again,
I don't want to talk about it.
And again, she's pointing to blocks. And I don't think it's too ridiculous. Like, I think some people might be like, oh, you took 9 of something, said he's pointing and called it Drummond. But I mean, a city block, it's a thing. That's an actual thing. So why wouldn't he demonstrate these things with blocks in the same way that he might have done San Francisco? We can't bring San Francisco up here because Chris will get too excited.
But let's just say, why wouldn't he have used a map to help you get where you're going in 1982?
Indeed.
Yeah, it'd make a lot of sense, right? It's not easy. That's the one thing I'll say about it. Yeah. There's a lot of, discussion about these puzzles being simple and easy, or, maybe that's the wrong way to put it, but, keep it simple. We hear that a lot. I'm starting to wonder, and I've wondered for a long time, are they really all simple? Was it that simple to start with? It took people how long to find the coordinates? Mm-hmm. I'm kind of embarrassed by that, but it's true, right?
Even Cleveland, I mean, how long did it take to find a planter that broke it open? Like, I mean, not all of these clearly, we can't just find the endpoint for all of these. Except for this one. But
yeah. I mean, Cleveland's a crazy puzzle. I think Cleveland is extremely difficult until you get to that park. And then it's like, well, it's pretty easy until the end, right?
So it's a total it's a hindsight puzzle. Like in hindsight, it's easy. Beneath 2 countries as the road curves. You're looking for 2 countries on a map. You go to a curving road, which that one's like super curvy. You did a great job. But like when you're like starting from scratch, it's nothing. It's very difficult. But I guess the only thing I want to add, leaving Cleveland again, is I've been dying to say this, but it never really comes up and it's not worth it, but I will. The leg eater. People are always sharing their cloven hoofed leg eaters and like leg eaters that do not have a horse hoof, that do not look like this leg eater, as if they're unique and special. But here in Brooklyn, there's a shitty apartment building maybe a quarter mile away that has a leg eater lamp in front of it. But it's the hoof. Like not the hoof, the paw that everyone's finding. And they find it on museums and these major cool buildings. And they're like, this is important because it's like, but no, in Brooklyn, like you're walking down a side street and you find this shit. So the fact that this one has a horseshoe on it, that is what makes it so important, right?
I would hope so. I think it's just too exact.
Yeah, it's
I don't even understand why people post different I don't know that style. I wish I had the proper name for it, different leg eaters, but it just doesn't harken to the image. It's very different. It's either the paw, there's not an animal that's swallowing the leg, for lack of better terms, but it's very exact, and people argue the nose and say, well, he didn't paint the nose exactly perfect. And come on, it's a 3-dimensional object and
it's so small, the picture would have sucked. Yeah. Like the picture he was given was probably what we're talking about. Where you go on Google Maps,
he would have had to been up on top of it to get the detail that well.
Yeah, like John's right. Like, I mean, this thing is literally like, this is not a large lamp.
No. And I don't know if it's that people don't understand that, or they just don't care that it's that small and seriously believe you're going to end up on a side street in Montreal starting at a very, very small lamp.
Yeah. And just getting there is hard. We've proven, I mean, I think as we talked about
still the verse, hard, right?
We'll demonstrate how hard it is to just get to this lamp to begin with. That like now it's like getting to that point where like it's a hard lamp to find, so you're not starting there.
Yeah, I'll give them this. So I'll give the people that say it's the start this. If he seriously believed that you could figure out the map from the painting easily, and it was pointing to Drummond and the lamp, then I believe that could be the start. But I just feel it's too difficult of a mini puzzle to arrive at and say, okay, you got to figure that piece out before you even do anything else. You know, I don't buy that. I think it's almost like find me here and you're there. So
I think we should revisit that. I think we should revisit that later once we've exhausted like the ideas. I think there's a couple questions about that you have a unique perspective on that should be answered. But for now, let's go into the verse. Tell us, you have a bunch of unique verse things going on that I think we need to talk about.
Yeah, totally. I mean, should we kick it off reading the verse? I mean, Chris, you probably have the best reading voice ever after that rendition of Fandango. Yes. You know, I think between us, we wasted a good portion of our, you know, last couple years on red herrings. You know, the book of a million red herrings. I mean, give it to Pell. Who would have thought there was only one puzzle and 8 million red herrings? But
red herrings are the best puzzles I've worked on.
There were two. There was the misleading pointing puzzle that told you that numbers would unlock the hidden treasure riddle. That's what sent everyone. Anyways. Okay, verse 5. Lane 222. You'll see an arc of lights, weight and roots extended together saved the sight of granite walls, windswept halls, citadel in the night. A wingless bird ascended, born of ancient dreams of flight. Beneath the only standing member of a forest to the south, Whitestone closest at 12 paces from the west side, get permission to dig out. Try not to read it in the way that I think it's meant to be.
And I think that's super important, right? Everyone likes to combine certain lines. And, you know, I think that's burned us in the past and probably will continue to burn us through, you know, a lot of these puzzles. But, you know, it's a lengthy verse. It's not short. You know, there's some unusual things here. I think there's 7 lines that are 3 words long, which is really unusual when you get to that of a forest section. You know, you see, you know, 3 word lines for what, 4 lines.
Mm-hmm.
I had something that, you know, just came up and when I was looking at that structurally, and, you know, I pulled all the 3 word lines out and you're left with 10 lines. This is October puzzle. You know, I kept thinking, you know, I was really against the, what was the Japanese clue where he says, start with the numbers in the verse to such and such, you know, kick off the puzzles more or less, right? And I thought it was an error. I always thought, you know, well, obviously he's talking about coordinates, right? So, you know, I started thinking about this a while ago and I was like, how would you really tie a verse to an image with a, you know, a number? Because people try and number these things, right? But they're not numbered in the book. They're just in an order. So the only way that I could think of that you could truly tie these together would be if you hit on the birth month, you know, and I stumbled across that the other day. I don't think it's correct, but it's interesting just because there's so many 3 word lines.
It's also interesting because all my efforts to tie those because of that were always to the numbered image. And my issue there was the images aren't numbered. They're just in an order, you know, like there is no, that would be a
numbered,
bad puzzle.
but they're numbered by the month.
That's what I mean. Yeah. So numbering them to the month makes more sense. than like San Francisco being one just because
Totally.
it's first.
Yep.
That always felt wrong to me. So that's a cool observation on your part. And I think that's kind of what's cool about, I would love to rip you apart for even bringing that up, but it made me just think like, that's how you number the images.
You ruined my weekend. Like my weekend's done now. I'm not going to be able to, I'm going to be looking through every single one.
Yeah. You know, I talk often about brainstorming, right? And people don't seem to understand that concept of brainstorming, because brainstorming isn't like starting at the beginning and being like, oh, I found it all. Yeah. And then someone comes in and they're like, no, I found it all. Yeah. And then Phil comes in and he's like, wait, I found it all. You know, it's really dissecting a line, you know, throwing out ideas, dissecting, you know, structure, you know, putting out ideas.
What is there to talk about if you already solved
Nothing. Yeah, totally, man. So, you know, that's one thing that, you know, I was really excited about the opportunity to work with you guys and do this, is I just felt like there's so much of that, you're wrong, I'm right, you know, or, you know, people interview people and they're shaking their heads, you know. It's not the whole concept of how you work a puzzle, right? Like, just talking about what's right and wrong is not going to get you there, right? I think people need to bring ideas to the table, right? I bring a lot of ideas to the table. If 1% are correct, I'm doing a hell of a job.
Yeah.
If 10% of them make you guys think and, you know, think about something differently and bring more ideas to the table, I'm doing a good job. So, you know, that's how I look at it. And I think, you know, as people watch this, I just want them to keep an open mind and, you know, take the thought process to heart.
Yeah.
And think about, you know, maybe you don't agree with me or you, Phil, or even Chris, you know, with that flower concept, but, you know, take it to heart, because when he started talking about that, I'm like, dude, I never even looked at how they were segmented.
I know that's exactly
bad
what I was
on
saying.
me,
yeah.
you know. You know, so now I'm thinking about that.
Yeah, and that's I say the same about like when people drop their Pittsburgh interpretations. I read through them all, because all you need is one verse interpretation to make sense, even if it's not Pittsburgh. Like, yeah, it's not Pittsburgh, but like, you know, if they find something for the hour in New York, or rain falls in St. Augustine, you know, and I'm just like,
you were going to a different city. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm like, oh, it could be that, but in the right city.
Yes. Yeah. And that's super important, because I think you've called me on this a few times where I'm just like, nah, I'm not going to read it. I'm sorry. You know, it's not happening. And you're like, I read everything. I'm like, what? But it makes sense, you know, because of what you just said. If you can pick up on someone, you know, peeling back the layers to a clue, it doesn't have to be in the right city, because it may be applicable to where the cask actually is. You know, I think the cities are right. You know, I think we'll probably get some level of confirmation to that soon. And there's still going to be argument over whether or not they're right after the fact. But
is the confirmation right? Is it learned?
Yeah, you know. that guy that confirmed it, are you sure he knew what he was painting? I don't know.
That wasn't Josh Gates. I don't know. He was doing nothing. But yeah.
So totally. I mean, I guess we can start at the top, right?
Yeah.
Perhaps the most frustrating word I've ever dealt with in a puzzle, lane. And just saying it as lane gives me just a huge sense of relief, because for many, many years, I don't think there was anyone that I knew that didn't combine lane and 222. Everyone combined it. And there's some really cool stuff. If you think about a regular lane, you know, that Drummond Court building that has a literal lane cut through it, you know, and in 1981, when they built that road, they cut a lane through a building, an apartment building, for Christ's sakes. It was 2 buildings from the Mount Stevens Club. So I was sold on that for the longest time. I couldn't figure out 222, but the Japanese clues changed everything here, right? You know, that was really interesting for me because I started to think, whoa, lane's a proper noun. I bet the misdirection to this is it has nothing to do with 222.
Yeah.
And, you know, I'll read the Japanese clue because I think it's super important how it's written and what is written. So this is from Phil's translation, by the way. So Phil, I don't know if you've ever had an opportunity to just talk about that live and, you know, say how it went, like who did it, you know, like you're confident in these. Like that was the one thing I noticed with you when you came to the table with the translation. Cause I was working with George when the other guy did the translation, and I was like, I don't know.
It doesn't sound good live. I can tell you that.
Yeah. I mean, the guy seemed to know what he was doing, but it kind of felt like he was, you know, thinking on the fly, you know, trying to solve the clues as he translated. But yours seemed legit, and you were super confident when you talked to me about it.
Yeah, he's a good friend. He went to NYU. He works in the studio that I used to work in. And yeah, he's got like everything's perfect. Like he born in Japan. I think his mom's Japanese, his dad's American, and he's been here since. And he knows nothing about this puzzle. And I didn't tell him anything about this puzzle. I just had him read this, and he's like asking questions, and I'm like, no, just read it. Tell me what it says. And it was funny, the things he would take for granted too is like Goro Goro, the train thing. That wasn't even in his initial translation. And I was like, what is this? This like sounds like. And he's like, oh yeah, that's just the noise a train makes.
What is this? Like,
it's in verse 12.
Okay.
It says Goro Goro
like
or something.
The whirring sound, is that related to it?
No, it's actually
verse 12. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Gora,
sorry.
Gara Gara.
Gara Gara.
Yeah.
And he didn't even give that to me originally. He just was like, oh, it just lists the sound. He said it like with his Japanese tone, and I was just like, what the fuck does that mean? Like, what makes that sound? He's like, it's kind of like a rolling. And I was like, what? Like, why would you use that? He's like, I don't know, for like a train, maybe. And I was like, okay, yeah. So things like that, you got to include them in the translation. Like, you just took it for granted. So yeah, it's just funny because like, yeah, he speaks Japanese well. He loves to translate. He says it is an art. He says it is not easy because the languages don't correspond. But yeah, I don't know. Yeah, that's why I feel confident in it, because he's not trying to fill in the blanks with what he thinks it should be. He was just filling it in.
Yeah, that's cool. I mean, I think that's what we're looking for. I mean, I believe that, you know, people still question this translation. I think it's excellent. But if you question it, it isn't hard to go out and get these translated.
Yeah.
It isn't difficult. You know, you can look around and pay a few bucks and get it translated on your own and verify it against what you see, you know.
Even mine, it's similar to the other ones to the point where like, I don't think there's anything in there that like that was the main thing. I just wanted to cross check it. I wasn't trying to do a better job or anything. I just wanted to make sure that like, you know, no one was hiding anything from us.
Yeah, it lines up. I mean, it definitely lines up. You know, there's some minor differences, but nothing crazy in my opinion. But this just feels right.
And in the translation, lane is proper. And he even gives a list of things lane could be. What? City, street, mountain. I think he says dot times infinity, like he often does. I don't know if that's this guy's humor, if that's a Japanese thing. But yeah, so I mean, on to what you found fits perfectly into that list.
Yeah, you know, and I think I would say for me, the most important addition to the lane clue, the Japanese clue, is the first part. says line 1, lane, if translated to a noun, it would be small street or narrow path. But I was told this lane is a proper noun. Why does he define it?
Mm-hmm.
Is lane a very, un-Japanese thing? Do they not have small side streets or narrow
All their
paths
streets
there?
are small side streets and narrow paths.
I thought so. So, the funny thing, it's not in this, but this is what I was reading, and I don't know if you can see it because of my background.
Yep, slightly higher in Canada, National Lampoon.
Yeah, so that's what I was reading when this came to me. I was reading this book, this National Lampoon special edition on Canada that Sean Kelly wrote with Ted Mann. And I was like, I don't know what Quebec means. I've been here for 15 years. I have no idea what it means. I think it's, something to do with the Algonquin language. I'd heard that before, or, I think it was, a language. So I looked it up and, I was like, oh my God. And it says the name Quebec comes from the Algonquin word for narrow passage or strait. That's the first sentence. And personally, I believe you need not go any further than that. Because, when you look at narrow passage and how he defines it in the clue, it's identical, man. I mean, it's really identical. So what I believe he's saying is that this lane is a proper noun, but it's actually the definition.
Yeah.
So Quebec means lane. Now, there's an argument around this, right? I've heard many people say, I don't think that's a good idea because they were speaking of the St. Lawrence River, where it narrows, and that was what they were talking about. Sure. But the Algonquin word, it's for narrow passage or strait.
And you're right.
Those are the two things. They can be referring to the river, which is in the image, by the way. But it doesn't have any relevance on whether his clue is valid.
I
to
agree,
me,
but you saw
it makes a lot of sense. Right?
I went deep into it, even to debunk that. I mean, shipping lanes, that's a phrase, a shipping lane. And the St. Lawrence is one of them, is a major shipping lane. And then just the definition of lane includes channel, which can only be in the water. So, I mean, even if you want to take that approach, it doesn't work. It's bunk regardless. Lane as Quebec may not be the answer, but it is an answer, hands down.
I'll accept that.
I'm sold.
Chris,
I don't need
Chris,
more than that.
Are you into it though, or do you have reservations? Because I'm really curious about what anyone feels about this. Because people are, I get that, I'm from Quebec and I learned this in school, and well, guess what? Byron wasn't, and
you learned it from some book.
Probably.
Easy enough. You go, I need to include Quebec because this is in Canada and I need to add extra clues to get people out of the United States. He looks up Quebec and he sees the exact damn definition you pull
the encyclopedia with the Q on it and you open it up to Quebec, and I guarantee it's the same first line.
Yeah.
I like lane though. I think the hint is supposed to be a hint. It's not the answer. Yeah. So the hint is to get you there, not to give it to you. So to peel it back one more layer, get from lane to proper noun to narrow passage to Quebec is that's the riddle. That's the puzzle to be solved. The hint only gets you halfway there.
Yeah, totally. And I mean, for me, why the hell did they define it, right? It means narrow passage per the definition. And this translator just happened to come up with narrow path. That's too damn close. You know, I just question, why did that get thrown in there?
That's good. I didn't pick up on that. That like the definition you found was the definition as provided by the Japanese translation.
Yes, exactly. Like there's a reason he gave the definition. I think there's a lot lost in translation in these. I just picture these guys, right? And I know I talked to you guys about it a little bit. It's 1982. They're on freaking rotary phones, right? He's in New York. This guy's in Japan. You know, is he recording it? So he's doing one of these with his recorder, or is he taking notes?
Yeah.
And, you know, we assume he translates well, but even good translators in that situation, it's not easy. You're going to miss stuff. You're going to make assumptions, you know?
Yeah. The assumptions is the big thing for real.
This guy totally made some assumptions, right?
Sure
so, yeah, I love Lane, man. And I had a very painful relationship with this word. I mean, the amount of hits I went through on newspapers.com for the Gazette were in the millions. And, you know, over, you know, about a year's time, in my spare time, I just would go through them all. And I was obsessed with trying to figure out what this proper noun was. You know, I talked about A.T. Lane on the last podcast, and, you know, I thought he was a terrible idea personally, but it was just the lack of people. You know, go to Roanoke and talk about Ralph Lane. Damn, that's a good start. But in Montreal, none of these were good starts. You know, there was nothing to connect Lane to. So the thing that I'll leave everyone with on Lane is, you know, whether you believe this is correct or not, think about how difficult that clue is if it is correct. If you don't have a hint, one word, it's capitalized, but every first word is capitalized. So there's no indication it's proper until you get this hint. If that's right, there's some hard stuff in these puzzles. So don't tell me it's simple, right? So I'll leave you with that. Take it for what it's worth. You know, leave some feedback, leave us some comments. You know, I'd like to see what people think about it. We'll interact. We'll answer some questions on the next episode, but I think Lane's a game changer. If people start thinking about the clue and how it was constructed, we may get into some more interesting things. Yep. So do you guys have anything else? Like, are there any ideas from your perspective that may work here?
Not for Lane.
I think it's just a testament to, you mentioned Ralph Lane, and I think it's a testament to intentional misdirection in this puzzle too, which goes to your simplicity comment as well. That Ralph Lane is very well known. He knew putting Lane at the beginning of this puzzle, in a puzzle where you're supposed to wed each verse to an image, as we discussed last week. Putting Lane as the first word and choosing Lane as the word for Quebec, if this is what he did, was an intentional decision. And I think we'll get into this in the second part. But yeah, I think that's important. But I think what's important next is, if the first clue is Quebec, what are we looking for next? Like, where are we trying to go from there? We're looking for something that takes us to Montreal, right? Like, we have to go from Quebec to Montreal. Like, if this is the puzzle he's putting together, that's how it's got to go, right?
Yeah, I'd agree. I mean,
222, when I looked at it, looks like the second half of a postal code. My postal code here is 3T2. I went to Google Maps and I was like, H3G2T2, enter. I'm fucking got this. It doesn't exist. But I thought I had a real good idea.
That was a good build up, though.
It is good, though.
It doesn't exist.
because people in the States probably don't get that, right? Because you're used to zip codes. And that's one thing when I came up here, I'm like, wow, these postal codes are effed up, man. Like H3W, 3A1, you know, it's it's madness, you know. Oh, that's an old address, so you can't track me on that one. But yeah, I mean, that's a good idea, Chris. I like it. But nothing.
No.
Unfortunately, right? But it gives people to think about, like we were just talking about before. And, you know, I guess, you know, Phil, I'll look at you because I took over on the first one. And, you know, do you have anything here, or do you want me to talk about where I believe 222 drops it?
I think it goes back to our resident Toonie user bringing up, I mean, I think what we all kind of agree on, like I looked at the roads, everyone loves the roads. And if you look up Route 20 in Quebec, there is a lot of two involved with it. Like they specify for some reason. I don't really understand, and I didn't really care to look too deeply. The 2-lane nature of it is apparently important. There's something important about this 2-lane nature of it. And then there's
of our
also
roads?
A major,
like in Montreal.
Yeah. What was that?
No, I don't. I just asked if it was the 2-lane nature of the roads coming into Montreal.
Yeah, I don't know. For some reason, the wiki specifies this is a 2-lane road, and they have some term for it, a super 2 or something.
Driving on it.
Yeah, and I was like, okay, that's weird. All roads are 2-lane roads, but
it's a highway though, like.
Yeah, but they also specify that it's been a major point of controversy. And when I see something like that, I'm like, this might have been in a newspaper. This might have been in something Byron read. And that point of controversy is that it's in 2 parts, and they have ceased to join these 2 parts. So like those 2 things together kind of made me think, okay, so we're in Quebec. Now we need to get to Montreal. We hop on Route 20 that has 2-lane highway, Route 20. It's not great though, because 222 isn't a good clue for that. Like, I mean, I found something that's 22 and 2, but I can't make it work. I like it for driving to Montreal. You know that my next clue, it works very well for me with my next clue that we'll get to.
Yeah.
But I feel like what you guys came up with also works very well for my next clue. So I don't know. I can't remember if Chris brought this to the table, or you brought this to the table, or you both brought this to the table, but I know Chris naturally uses the word loony and toonie. So Chris, what is important about 2s and 20s in Canada?
No, this is all John. He asked me to confirm it, and I had to like go back into my childhood and be like, we used to have $2 bills, man. We used to have $1 bills. Before, like, we don't even have a penny anymore, and we've got loonies and toonies. But when we had bills, the Queen was on the $2 bill, the Queen was on the $20 bill, Queen was also on the $1 bill, and they would age her as the years went on. She would get older on the money, but she was still, it was a young Queen in 1980 on the $2 bill and the $20 bill.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, that, I don't know what hit me when I thought about Queen Elizabeth, but I think it was just the second. You know, I was thinking about, you know, 2 things, and I knew that Queen Elizabeth was on the toonie, right? And I was like, damn, Queen Elizabeth II's on the toonie. And I don't remember who said it, because I posted it at some point. And they were like, yeah, the toonie was after 1982, you know? And I'm like, oh my God, like the one thing I don't check, you know, in my 15, 16 years of doing this, I get totally roasted for, you know? Yeah.
Like the late 80s.
Yeah. And I knew she was on the 20. So I was like, man, was there I don't know if you brought up the $2 bill, or I found that there was a $2 bill, and I was like, dude, was she on the 2 as well? And I don't know. The reason I love it is it drops you at a really famous place, right? The Queen Elizabeth.
Downtown. Yeah.
Yeah, man. I mean, the Queen Elizabeth was one of the Grand Hotels. So I didn't really understand what that meant from a Canadian perspective. And what it means is it's a railroad hotel, right? So it was one of the major hotels that the railways built, you know, and it wasn't the CPR, which we'll talk about a little bit later, but it was a Grand Hotel. And then, you know, I started to think about, you know, some of the iconic stuff that happened there. And, you know, the bed in 69, you know, where, you know, Lennon and Yoko went to Amsterdam. They did the first bed in. They were scheduled to come back to New York to do the second. But in 68, John had a cannabis conviction. And so they wouldn't even let him into the United States back then. So interestingly enough, they were going to hit the Bahamas, I believe. And I don't remember exactly what went wrong, but they were going to go to one of the big hotels there. And they ended up in Montreal at the Queen Elizabeth, right? And it took place in like 4 or 5 different rooms. And at the end of the day, I think they recorded in room 1742 with, you know, John, Yoko, Leary was there, a couple other guys was there. And they did give peace a chance there, you know, and they had that bed in, you know, it's, you know, Byron would have been 16 or something like that. I posted it in my last blog, and I was just thinking about, you know, being a teenager in the time, you know, where the Vietnam War was happening. You know, you're 15, 16 years old, you're seeing people, you know, get drafted into the, you know, the armed forces, get shipped out. You know, some of them are coming back, some of them aren't. You know, it was a sad time for a lot of young people. And, you know, it was that flower child time where it was just like, we don't really want this, you know? So if Byron was at all in tune to that, it was a very relevant event, you know, for John to even do that. You know, he was still part of the Beatles then, right? You know, the Beatles broke up, what, a year later, I think, maybe 2 years later. That's a huge statement, man. I mean, we see people making, you know, similar statements like that, you know, on social media, but it wasn't as prominent as that for me. And, you know, that makes the QE really important to Montreal. And not just that, right? You know, a lot of people have stayed there, you know, for the expo, you know, a lot of the diplomats and whatnot. You see de Gaulle. I think Bush stayed there. The Queen's been there a few times. The Queen Mother's been there. Tons of people have stayed at this hotel. And, you know, even tying it back to the month, you know, anyone that, you know, grew up in the 70s in Quebec, which I did not. So this is something that I researched and found out about, would know about the October crisis, right? And the October crisis was, you know, some bad times in Quebec. I won't get into the details, but it ties into this hotel as well. And this is the October puzzle. So another interesting connection. I don't know if it's right. You know, it could easily be coincidence. But the fact that 222 drops you on René Lévesque, what? It's almost right across the street from Sun Life, right next to Mary Queen of the World. You know, you have Dorchester Square, Place de Canada right there. It's right in the heart.
I noticed you
everything
didn't
you want.
name one building, though. I noticed you didn't name one building.
You know, it's funny because I'm done with the Queen Elizabeth, and we can definitely jump into an Arc of Lights. But when I was downtown on last Friday, I shot some videos. It was cold as ever. I mean, wind blowing. you know, the windswept halls could just be like, Montreal sucks. Like, because literally you if you stand on Drummond and feel that wind whip over the mountain on a cold day, it's a nightmare. But I tried to shoot some video. I got home and it was, you couldn't hear me. It was so windy.
Nah.
But transitioning into what you're about to say, I couldn't remember which one of the two buildings it was. Is it the Cheese Grater?
So it's the Place Ville Marie, which
Okay.
is, I guess it looks like an X on maps. I don't know.
Yeah. Because if you're standing there
Yeah.
and you're looking right at the park, which I was, you see the I can't remember the name of the building, but you know, people call it the Cheese Grater because
Right.
if you look at it, it looks like an old school cheese grater, you know, the way the windows are shaped. And I was like, that isn't the right building, but I know which one it is now. So
yeah, and
tell us about the Beacon, Phil. Tell us about the Beacon.
And it's another major building. I like that you named a bunch of other major buildings because we're talking right downtown. We're talking the Golden Square Mile or whatever. You know, like this is getting us from Quebec to like downtown Montreal, not just to Montreal. You know what I mean? Like it's like you just said, Dorchester Square. And I harbored a thought that's, you know, it's not great, but it's good because I was thinking of from that standpoint of if we're in Quebec and we have to get to Montreal, how do we get there? And one building, the Place Ville de Marie, has the beacon on top. And this is 4 lights that spin around in a circle and illuminate the night. And it said you can see them from, I don't even remember, like really far away. Let me see real quick.
Yeah,
160 kilometers away. You can see this beacon.
So I'll give you an example of it. Yeah. So the way I think of it at night, right, is if you're coming into the city from the west where I live, it's basically, you know, spotlights on top of the building that shoot up into the sky and crisscross and stuff. So as you're coming into the city on the highway, like it's like whenever we used to go into the city to dinner or, you know, get drinks or everything, you'd see that and you're like, yeah, Montreal's ready tonight. You know, that's how it feels. It's one of those really? The city's ready to go. Yeah. I always look at it and you see the lights, you know, and it makes it feel like there's an aura, there's, you know, that energy about it. So you can see it from a long way away. Now, the daytime's the issue, right? But I'll let you continue.
I understand because you've had good issue with it, and one of them is you'll see an arc of light. Does he want you to see it when you're there, or is this more a global, like when Montreal you see this arc of light? The other issue is it an arc? And I've seen multiple answers to this. Sometimes they shoot it straight into the air and it looks like the freaking bat symbol. Other times, like you said, there's crisscrossing. But I have seen that when it's in full rotation, it makes a bit of a dome, which I've seen people complain that this isn't supposed to be an arch of light. It's an arc of light. And a dome of light is about as good as I can come up with for an actual arc of light. So that's where I just kind of feel this is kind of, I try to steer clear of that iconic word. The whole like, because
so do I. It's too good though, right? Like it's
a good word, and it does seem like this Montreal beacon, especially from your own experiences, it's a bit iconic about Montreal. You can see it from far away. I just always wondered, are you approaching Montreal and you see this arc of light that is telling me maybe it's not even a boots on the ground clue, you know, maybe it's just like, what has an arc of light? Montreal. And I it's just a thought. And the fact that the Queen Elizabeth is literally across the street. It's not like across the street and down the street. It's like, it's across the street from the Queen Elizabeth makes your 222 and my arc of light just work so well together as a possibility.
Yeah, you know, I don't know that I had an issue with it. Where I had the issue is the iconic thing, because to me, it's not iconic, but I get what you're saying now. I get how you're describing it, and, you know, taking it from what I described, it's something you know about, right? I wasn't really aware of the dome piece, you know, when you mentioned the lights spinning.
Mm-hmm.
So that strengthens it a bit from my perspective.
It's
but
just it comes back to what was it doing in 1980? What did Byron see it
sure,
doing? You know,
yeah.
like he was there for what, a few days. He had to gather these. It's hard, you know. It's just hard to know. The fact that it can do an arc, and it is downtown, makes it again. It's the same as I said, like Lane. Yeah, it's a possibility for me.
Yeah, no, it's fair. It really is fair. I have problems with the daytime thing, but I also think about it and I'm like, you know, I'm asking people to throw out ideas that, you know, help to stimulate thought, and I can't rule that out. You know, it's definitely a viable option. I always tell you, some things, you know, I don't feel well about because it's not what I wanted. It's not what I expected.
Sure.
I didn't make these puzzles, right? So there's a lot of, I think, emotion tied to this as you get into it and you work on it for a long time. But you have to kind of separate yourself from that. And that's what I've been trying to do. And, you know, kind of accept some more, I guess, different trains of thoughts than, you know, I go down. Mm-hmm. Because while I may not expect that to be the answer, it could be the damn answer, and Byron loved it. So
yeah, and yeah, it could,
I'll give you totally. That.
It's just, you know, there are no getting bent on an answer, I think, is the biggest fallacy of this whole puzzle in general. Is just like, you don't know what the answer is when you get to the spot. So, and frankly, the reason I don't really argue with you about this too much, other than bringing it up constantly and arguing with you all the time,
we argue, you know, it's funny because I think if people would watch Phil and I debate through text, it's almost, we write in different ways than we speak, right? And when you see my face, when you see us smiling at each other and laughing, it's very different, right? But then we get into this text thing, and I try to type like I talk sometimes, just so I at least give the sense that, you know, I'm not trying to kill people when I'm responding, because I get that all the time. You know, I'm often doing other things and I'm brief, and I love replying to everything. But our debates on paper, you know, in a
I think they look painful. I think people would think that we're not going to talk again.
Yeah. But I think it's so easy to have the dialogue, right? You know, when we're together and we're talking about these things.
Well, a lot of times we do just call
these are puzzles, man. You know,
if we actually come up with something good, that's the other thing. We argue about dumb shit. If we actually come up with something good, I think we just call and like we go, yo, dude, I think I might have done this. But,
totally.
But yeah, I don't know. The reason I don't really argue about it is because even if it's not right, and like some of these other ideas we've come up with are right, they all serve the same purpose. They all just confirm we're at the right spot. Like nothing really changes. Like if we do what you posted a blog post a couple days, let's talk about that now. It does essentially the same thing. It puts you at Queen Elizabeth, and then you see some arcs of light. So what is that?
Yeah, so I'll talk about two things. And, you know, I'm torn on this, right? Because I love riddles. And, you know, my love of riddles can be detrimental to my puzzle solving abilities, because when I create puzzles, I like to make riddles. Sure. So I often believe that I'm making riddles that don't exist in these puzzles. But I think they're good, so I talk about them, right? So before we get to the Golden Arches, let's talk about the Sun Life building.
Fair.
Could the Sun Life be an arc of lights? It's literally the sun. There's some issues perhaps with pluralization, you know, which we've discussed, but it's another gigantic, you know, iconic building in downtown Montreal that's, you know, when you see my video, Heidi will be pointing the camera at the Queen Elizabeth, which is behind me. And if you turn like this, that's the Sun Life.
Yep.
If you turn like that, that's Place Ville Marie, and you know, where the McDonald's statue used to be.
Which comes back to my it's all the same. But
yeah, totally. I was just giving perspective on they really are that close, like you described.
But I like it. Again, lights is a problem. It's the sun is one light.
Yeah, but the sun
or the rays.
Yeah, rays are plural.
Fair enough.
Yeah, I don't think there's a lot to talk about.
That's what I'm. Yeah, it's kind of.
It's a maybe. It doesn't feel great though, right?
Throw out a bunch of lights, arcs of lights. One of them's right. Move on.
Yeah. So I mean, God, I love this so much, you know, and I feel like I'm going to get killed for this, but I think it will go to show that, you know, if you really think about what was going on and, you know, what is American at heart, if you think about the Golden Arches as an arc of lights, it's not the biggest stretch when you're in a puzzle talking about the Golden Square Mile. Obviously,
I didn't
Golden
make that
Arches.
Connection. That's good. I like that.
You know, if you talk about the Golden Arches, anyone in the United States knows you're talking about McDonald's. And that was the same in 1980 as it is today, right? So I don't know what got me on that, but I was like, holy God, McDonald's. There's a statue of John McDonald, not spelled the same, right?
Yeah, it doesn't matter.
Standing right at the edge of Place du Canada. You know, he's not there anymore. Some folks yanked him off of his perch and his head rolled, which I put in my blog post.
I was wondering where you found that perfect freaking. I almost thought you made this solution to go with the picture, the cover picture.
It was funny because I guess I had heard about it, but I thought he was back up there. And we got down there and I was, oh my God, they canceled the first prime minister of Canada. You know, like I get, you know, there's some bad people and people do bad things, right? But the first prime minister of Canada, that's sort of relevant to your country. But a lot of debate on it. And, you know, he's not standing. But the one thing I'll say about McDonald as well is if that's the puzzle, he's also in the image.
Yep.
And it's written on the monument. It says McDonald, right? So if you just happen to think of it, you'll see it, right? And take it for what it's worth. I think it's a cool riddle. Anyone that doesn't, I say F you. No, I'm just kidding. You know?
And everyone
that's the
just
person they like,
the
right? You know, like that's
what
you
they're
know,
here
for the people that don't know me, right? I'm John, aka Phoenix, aka Golden Martyr, and that's probably Golden Martyr coming out right there.
Yes, indeed.
So yeah, that's my current arc of lights.
Now, I don't think we defined this early, but we didn't really intend to go super far with this verse today, right?
No, I think if we take it to probably a wingless bird ascended, you know, then it almost feels like, to me, there's a bit of a odd riddle at the end, and you know, we could touch on that when we get there quickly, but I think that takes some thought. And there's a lot.
We touched on it last week when me and Chris talked about what we think Forest to the South could be.
Yeah, you guys came up with some interesting stuff there. You know, Chris got my mind, you know, my wheels turning a little bit. And man, you know, I agree. There's something is not literal about this. Mm-hmm. Based on where you end up, there's a lot to do in a very, very confined area. And I will tell you, on that street, there's only a few places you could probably dig, and they're not huge places. So yeah, you're gonna have to do something creative at the end with this one. At least I believe.
You don't need, you mean you don't need a tree and a stone and 12 paces and a west side, and you don't need all these things when you're in these plots you're talking about, is what you're saying.
You know, when I look at it, I think you will probably address all of these things, but not in the literal sense, right? So
Yeah.
if you're in a 20 by 20 foot square, I wouldn't expect someone to give you the directions to find the tree in the 20 by 20 foot square, you know, then a white stone. Well, wait, the closest white stone. So there's multiple white stones in this area. And then at the end of that, you're going to establish the west side and take 12 paces from it. I just have a feeling it's going to be very difficult to get that configuration and not walk onto some concrete. But that's just my opinion.
Well put.
Well, I didn't have anything for Arc of Lights, but I have something for Weight and Roots.
Oh, nice.
Well, I'm gonna kind of hit 3 lines. You know me, I'm a verse structuralist. You can call me the Levi Strauss of The Secret. No, don't call me that. It's a bad joke.
You just solved the puzzle, man.
But when I look at these next 3 lines, I guess what I should say is I believe that the lines are cut intentionally to make it more challenging to understand. And I think the Japanese translator hinted as much from his own perspective that he couldn't understand which lines go with which lines. And I think that's part of the puzzle, is figuring out which lines go with which lines. So if you look at these 3, and what I like to do is just put them all on one line and read it like a sentence and see if it makes sense. Like, weight and roots extended together saved the site of granite walls. So it's telling me there are these 2 things, weight and roots extended together saved the site of granite walls. And I think John has an interesting, the site of granite walls, that I'll get to in a second, but applying the Japanese hint here to think about structure, architecture, buildings, weight and roots. So I look at weight. I noticed that the only other word related to weight in this verse is the word stone. Stone is 14 pounds. It's a measure of weight. And then I was thinking about roots extended. Roots extended. What is roots extended? What does it mean to extend a root, to make it longer? One way to bring a root, bring more out of it, is a square. A root is like, not, I don't know the right math term for it, but you take the square, the square root. If you
totally
extend your root, you get a square. And then I was thinking about squares. So stone square, what does stone square give me? Squares have 4 corners. So I was like, okay, stone corner together, cornerstone.
Oh wow.
Whoa.
Dude.
So then I was like, okay, cornerstone saved the site of granite walls. Well, FB walls is stamped on a granite cornerstone. Architecture, building, structures. Cornerstones are like, it's fucking cornerstone. Cornerstone, granite FB walls. Credit to John for FB walls. But
so the punchline just was like the one thing that I actually found in The Secret that, in my opinion, is like no one can argue it, although they do, and Chris just explained it. So thanks.
That's pretty cool. Stone, like you pretty much, you love your transitive property, but you just use the substitution property, and that's damn good.
It was amazing. I love it.
He's been waiting for that for a week and a half.
I've been holding on to that for a week and a half.
He would not tell me. He would, and I was getting frustrated. I'm like, okay. Like Phil asked me about Houston today, right? And he's like, yeah, you know, I was thinking about looking at the children's zoo, and you know, I know you have some stuff. And I'm like, yeah, no, I need to keep that for a surprise on the Houston episode, right? You guys are holding out on me. I'm holding out on you.
Yeah, but, it's just like
that was legit, man. I like it.
That was good. Yeah, Chris
I wasn't sure how it was gonna land.
Just started looking at Montreal.
I wasn't expecting it.
And he said, I have some secrets. I have some good drops. And I'm like, these are going to be half-baked theories that like are on Q4T from 2008 that we're going to be like, yeah, dude, come on. But
I think you need to write about that. I don't think I'll be able to explain it. Yeah.
That's cool. And it takes all those 3 lines that I have nothing for other than Ellis Island when I try to take this verse out of Montreal, which is not a great move, but that's good.
Yeah. I think it's a great interpretation that I honestly was not expecting. And how can you not like it when there is literally a granite cornerstone with the name Walls inscribed on it? The one thing,
the site. Oh my goodness.
Yeah. The Together Save the Site. I don't know that I quite understood that.
So it was the together doesn't go with Save the Site. He like
the roots extended together.
So it's like weight and stone, roots extended is corner, and then you put them together to get cornerstone.
Yeah, he used your own move. He used a classic Hartoopy line break.
Yeah, thanks for that name drop. Yeah, I do have one thing for this, and man, I like it, but it's difficult today. I don't know that it would have been difficult in 1982 if you were from Montreal, right? So I was doing some research, and the Bank of Montreal on the corner of St. Catherine and Drummond had a fire that, you know, ripped through the interior of the building. Super old building, you know, beautiful stone building. But the Bank of Montreal wanted to demo that thing. You know, they were planning to completely demolish the building and rebuild, you know, I believe in the same location. But there's an issue with that. So any building within 500 feet of a national historic site cannot be demolished without the review of, I believe it was the Minister of Culture. So talk about a sick job, right? Like, you get to make the decision on whether billion-dollar companies can build new properties. You don't think they were getting greased, right? So
not in the 80s, not at all.
No, I mean, you know, they, you know, an 8-ball and, you know, 50K, and all of a sudden you can demo your building, right? So the Mount Stevens Club is within 500 feet. The Minister of Culture made the decision that the Bank of Montreal was not allowed to demolish this building because of the relation to the Mount Stevens Club. I'm not exactly sure why, but I believe it's got something to do with the, you know, the look and the feeling and keeping that whole, you know, atmosphere in the area, right? Because when you look at that old mansion, there aren't many of them left. And, you know, there was the YMCA right across the street, which used to be, you know, before it was demolished and, you know, rebuilt into something else. It was you know, it was an ornate stone building as well. But the irony of that is, I believe it was 2011, that building requested demolition as well, because they wanted to put office buildings in there. And the building had the YMCA etched into the outside of the building. So I don't think the real issue there was they didn't want the building because of the YMCA. and the Minister of Culture approved that, and they knocked it down. But the Mount Stevens Club, Weight and Roots Extended, together saved the site of the Bank of Montreal building. So that's my clue.
Yeah, it's good. I think that
deep.
That kind of historical stuff, I think a lot of people look at the Montreal puzzle and say, oh, it's a little too historical.
Yeah.
There's too much shit going on. But I think just based on my own Hail Mary today to try to find something good for this episode, there's just so much history in that city. I found that the Sugar Man there, Red Hat.
Redpath, yeah.
Redpath.
John Redpath. It's still there.
Redpath,
The sugar is Redpath in the grocery stores, at least in Montreal.
This is a mile away,
Yeah,
or not a mile, but like, it's not close to Drummond. But all of a sudden,
it's right up by the museum that people like.
And I go through his wiki, and all of a sudden we're tying to like 3 different George Drummonds. And
that I didn't mention.
Yeah, and he sold like the land to become Drummond Street. And it's just like, even if this guy isn't involved, it just shows this like weight and roots of the city, like it's just like there's a lot of history here. And if he did choose to use this leg eater that's in front of the Mount Stephen Club, I think there is some history in this puzzle, and that makes it more difficult now from how people approach, just from the whole, I'm going to find image matches, I'm going to find walls on a wall. But I think there's also this element of history that Byron might have thought was totally reasonable, of just like, well, look, they found this leg eater, like read a damn book, guys.
Yeah.
Like,
and you wouldn't have had to, right? For at least the bank.
Sure,
I guess my point to the bank piece is it happened in 1979. If you worked in that area, which most people did downtown, you knew about it. It was in the papers. People read newspapers. You can look it up, in newspapers.com, that type of thing. So what you're saying about the interconnective history is super cool.
It was insane.
The one thing I left out of the Queen Elizabeth is the architect that designed that building. His name is George Drummond. Ironically, you're going to Drummond Street to George's house. That's a hell of a coincidence. It probably is, but man, it makes you think, right?
Yeah, there's a lot of that stuff going on. Yeah,
totally. Should we have a drink?
I think so. I have a special surprise for our Montreal, Quebec episode.
Okay.
All right.
I have finished my first batch of absinthe.
Oh wow.
I did not distill
it. It's got
a
green hue, right?
Yeah. It's greenish. It's like a greenish yellow. I don't know if I can get a little darkness out of here. But yeah, it came out good.
Bottle.
Yeah, I have these little 200 milliliter bottles from Journeyman Distillery. Is
that like a pH in there to like what's inside?
Absinthe.
That's absinthe, Chris.
It looks like
that's
there's a piece of paper inside. Nobody died.
Oh no, I think it's just the cork. Oh, that's the wax.
Oh, yeah. Look, it's just the reflection.
This was a crazy experience for me. This whole making this absinthe, because it was just like I wanted the flavor profile of an absinthe, but like I drink more of a pastis, which is actually macerated, which is just an infusion. And I wanted to use wormwood to make it authentic. And without distilling the wormwood, it's the most bitter thing I've ever tasted in my life. And it tastes absolutely awful. It ruined everything about it for me. So now I've made a few more runs, and it's better now, but it's been a fun experience. I recommend it for anyone who's bored during these pandemic days to just toss shit in their liquor and see what happens.
So are you doing 200 mLs at a time? So did you do like a first run and then you adjusted it and you did a second run and it's
for this one? Absolutely. Cause I have no idea what I'm doing. I honestly did less this time. I split it into 3 runs and tossed a bunch of shit in there, but
awesome.
I came up with something I like. I can finally, I'm a very by the books person. I like to know what I'm doing. So the experimentation is very stressful for me. It's been a heck of a couple weeks, but But yeah, it is fun.
So how do you drink your absinthe? Like what is your way like to
I just
drink
add a little
absinthe?
water to it.
Okay, so you don't mess with the tradition or like
No.
I talked about absinthe recently, and I have a fountain, I have a few bottles, but I mean, it's not my thing. I like it, but I like the ritual of it, man. I
Sure.
think about it, and like there's a absinthe bar in the Old Port that I've always wanted to go to, but it's like, before COVID, it felt like, you walk into this like kind of seedy, dark place, like all of a sudden I'm going to be accused of, murder and having an affair just because I was in the place, it has that type of vibe,
Yeah.
and now COVID, and it's like, you're never going in that building again. So,
I know,
yeah,
right?
I'm down with absinthe, but, for me, it's definitely about the ritual. I think it's just super cool, reading and, hearing about, France and how they had these underground, absent places, and man, it's neat stuff. It's the stories and that
Yeah, and
that vibe, I want to live that old bootlegger underground vibe,
there's
maybe
such a
coupled with a little
variance. It's a lot like
Sons of
gin
Anarchy.
in that respect, and that's what I like about it too. Is they're all very different. You can find the one that you enjoy or whatever. But yeah, but what do you have in that fancy ass glass? You're swilling around
I have
there?
an absinthe story if you want to hear it.
Oh, let's go there. Then let's go there first.
So I was in Copenhagen, and there's this like weird area of Copenhagen that's like the anarchist collective. It's called Christiania, and like the police aren't allowed in. It's like fully contained. And we were playing a show in some weird bar, and they had smuggled in this Polish absinthe, and they mixed it with grenadine, and it went hot pink. And they were just sipping this like hot pink juice, and I was like, what the fuck are you drinking? And they were like, it's absinthe. And I was like, oh, you guys are fucked up. Tasted fine, tasted good, but I had never
That's
thought to put
crazy.
grenadine in it. It just seems like
Nah,
something you wouldn't do.
Makes sense that it turned hot. pink,
sweetens
I
it a
think.
bit, right?
Yeah, it sweetens it. It brings out like pomegranate flavor. It was fine, but it like, I don't know, not my favorite thing. I don't like love it, but it was decent.
Yeah, I've never heard of the grenadine ad. I may have to try it. I have some good grenadine, but
It's
yeah,
actually a
I don't
thing with
know.
pastis, so I understand the concept. With pastis, there's all sorts of drinks. You add grenadine, you add mint. I think there's one with orgeat, and there's names for all of these, like the Maresque, the Perrault, and so it makes sense that they would kind of transfer those over to absinthe to make a more gimmicky kind of version.
Yeah, they were just looking to
It's
get
like
real fucked up. They're like old punks, just like having time.
But yeah,
love it. I love it. So I'm doing bitter as well. I have not been feeling the greatest. So I'm like, damn, I need to drink. So I chose Fernet again. So I'm doing a little Fernet Branca. Man, it's growing on me. I
It
get it.
does.
I always, describe it as, people are like, how do you drink Fernet? And I'm like, that's kind of awful, but you just come back to it, and all of a sudden one day you're like, wow, this is some fine spirits that I'm drinking today, and it's like if I described it to like a 18-year-old kid that's drinking in a bar, I'm like, it's Jägermeister without all that sugar. And that's exactly
That's fair.
the first taste. You're gonna be like, oh, and it's gonna be some hipster bartender, downtown that gives you a free shot, and that's why you drank it, and everyone's pumped about it,
Hipster
So
with a beard and a newsboy cap. Anyway,
I describe it
that's
as
a flat
taking a
cap.
shot of Listerine with a mouthful of bay leaves.
what do
That's
you got,
pretty
Chris?
accurate.
So I brought the Canadian whiskey because like this is going to be the Canadian episode, right? So I got
That's
a little
good.
Bear Face.
Okay, as long as it's not Canada Club.
Oh, what? Canada
I don't know. I trust you, but I also don't trust you. You come up with like flower petals and shit.
What's wrong with flower petals?
We'll see.
Fair.
Yeah, this is the Bareface is good. It's one of the red whiskeys, so it's like this new trend in Canadian whiskey is the red whiskey. It does like a certain number of years in a old bourbon cask, then it transfers into like a certain kind of wine cask, and then it goes into this like Hungarian cask. And I just realized that cask, CASK, the whiskey cask, is not CASQUE, the treasure cask. So
well, there's actually no
that just happened.
Cask. Byron made that shit up.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's some take on hat, right?
It's a helmet, yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, sorry. Keep going.
So does that mean the etymology of like cask, the barrel cask, is also based on hat?
I hope not, because that would be very unusual.
Yeah, it's good. It's got different interesting notes like fruit and nuts and vanilla, the usual. It's not like a rye.
I don't know if you actually tasted it.
It's not.
This is his go-to, right? He's gonna have a Lagavulin and he's gonna be like, I taste fruit and nuts and vanilla, and it's like straight peat,
No, the last one there was no fruit and nuts, but the last one was like sweet and vanilla. But I like my whiskey in a little bit on a bourbon side. So it's like whiskey in a bourbon cask, it's going to get similar flavors, that same kind of oak, versus like the spicier rye I'm going to use in a cocktail. I'm not going to drink it straight.
Of course, yeah.
They'll kick me in the balls for that.
I love rye. Rye is a cocktail in itself. But that was our
I dig that though.
4 to 5 minutes of alcohol talk today. I think so. For the second half, I'm just thinking a quick wrap up. We didn't really emphasize how close Granite Walls is to the Leg Eater. We didn't touch on Citadel, but it's the same as Granite Walls. It says Citadel on the building. There was a banner that hung out over the street, right, that said Citadel as well. And
it was actually a sign. There was a sign out, towards the sidewalk, just offset from the sidewalk, and it was a large sign, and it said Salvation Army Citadel. Yeah. But I mean, that's inscribed on the building. If you have a problem with Citadel, don't have a problem with Citadel. Have a problem with In the Night. That's the only thing that I've ever heard brought up that could potentially derail that or change it significantly, right? I think when he wrote these, he'd probably need some sort of, I hate using filler, but it is, poetic in a sense. So he needs some words.
He had to rhyme lights with night, with sight, with flight.
Yeah. So I don't have an issue with it.
The other 4 were real good, and Knights is just kind of what it is.
Yeah, totally.
But isn't there like Knights of the Salvation Army and stuff? Isn't that like a thing?
Yeah, there are, I believe. And I think I talked about that a little bit on the podcast that I did. Yeah. And I remember talking to Brian Zinn about this. And I don't know that I was able to verify it, but I remember Knights of the Salvation Army as well. So,
so I didn't know if
I'm sure that's just me.
It sounds right to me.
It could be me, because I definitely feel like somewhere over my lifetime, I've heard that several times,
Okay. So the Too Long Didn't Read is essentially, we've got the Leg Eater with Walls half a block down, and Citadel.
Yeah, we didn't talk about down. Walls. Yeah. And Walls is closer than half a block, right? Yeah. So that was a crazy find when I stumbled across it. And you're literally walking up to the building or past the building going to the Mount Stephen Club, and the bottom of the building has these stones, or it looks like maybe it's surfaced. And it's not just the cornerstone, it runs along the bottom. There's different stones, but the corner one literally says, something laid and whatnot by FB Walls. So
Right.
that thing, if you're standing looking at it, you know, if I were to turn like this, you can see the lamp.
Mhm.
It's small, but you can see it. So if you would walk one building up, you hit the old YMCA, and then the old YMCA is immediately across the street from the Mount Stephen Club. So this thing's like, it's 100 foot from a lamp.
there.
It's less than 100 foot. Yep.
Yeah, and you can see Citadel down the street. I think that's what we're kind of getting at here, is that these are good clues in them of themselves, but they're also close to one of the most verifiable image matches in the entire puzzle.
Yeah.
It's hard to deny.
So I guess
it's super unique, right?
Yeah.
Like that's, you know, we talk a lot about image
and the fleur-de-lis.
matches.
The fleur-de-lis adds to the uniqueness. Bring that, you know.
Yeah. I mean, it's right there on the fence, right?
On the fence, yeah.
Yeah, in each section. So the thing that really gets me is it's in the right composition, or I'm missing my word there, but if you're looking at it, the leg eater on the northern side in conjunction with the fleur-de-lis, it matches right up with how they sit. You know, they're obviously a little further apart, but you know, you get it. It's exactly how it appears.
So it's not just a leg and a face that has a horse hoof, like we said before. It's also this fleur-de-lis that we just took for granted.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that was the big reveal on the initial Expedition Unknown. And I remember like watching that and being like, that is not what it looks like in the book. And I've been trying to figure out this ridiculous little shape that's, you know, doesn't make any sense. And the funny part about this for me is people will say, well, that's why it's not there, John. He covered that up because it's not at the leg eater. It's not near the leg eater. So he wanted to make sure that he covered that fleur-de-lis up. I don't know that I agree with that. I mean, I would think it may hearken some French vibes, and it's a flower. And if you notice, there's a pattern of flowers across all of these images. Throwing a French flower in may kind of screw up what he was trying to get at with all of the flowers. So
also to think a painting is Dutch with the iconic French flower.
Yeah, and just the implication there that to have the foresight to remove the fleur-de-lis means he found this thing, was like, oh crap, I can't believe this is in our image. I guess I got to remove the fleur-de-lis from our image because it doesn't hearken to this little spot on Drummond Street. Like, that's absurd.
Yeah. And JJP definitely didn't know what he was painting, right? Because, you know, he painted the floor and Byron saw it and removed it. But John didn't know that he was painting Montreal.
Yeah.
You know, people make that statement often. You know, Palencar doesn't know what he painted, where he painted, or, you know, there's some level. But I've even heard people say that he doesn't know the cities.
No,
like, that's absurd.
Boston in a city.
You know, that's absurd.
Yeah, he definitely knew where those letters were there to see.
But yeah,
I don't know how anyone else would, but he did, you know.
So if we're good with the Montreal discussion, I had two questions that I thought would be fun to just talk about real quick. As I troll Facebook and whatever, do we want to tap on those real quick as a little intro?
Did you want to hit?
You want to talk about some others?
No, it'll be some other.
Yeah, man. Yeah, we can talk to Wingless Bird, but I mean, it gets lengthy, I think.
We save it for the next time.
And I think this first question I want to ask actually kind of
let me give you a preview of why I think Wingless Bird is Wingless Bird.
Oh, that'd be good, yeah.
And then we'll talk about it another time. So can you see it's hard to see, right? This is the National Lampoon's slightly higher in Canada.
Mm-hmm.
If you flip to the picture there's a train. There's a train here, right? I don't know what this native tribe is called, and Chris, you may know how to pronounce this. It's either, I would say, Métis or Métis, something Métis. Of that nature. Métis. So it says the Métis assume disguises to ambush the Iron Horse. The Iron Horse.
Yeah,
it's a train.
It's a train.
It's a train. So I would tell everyone, think about that clue about the Iron Horse, and could that Japanese translator have interpreted what Byron said incorrectly, and it wasn't a motorcycle he was talking about, it was a train. And then we'll leave the rest for next time.
Yeah, and you already commented on the history.
Always leave them hanging.
Trains in Quebec, and anyway.
Yeah, George Stephen, that was his claim to fame. He made all of his money off of that risk. They basically, him and Strathcona, Donald Smith, who was his cousin, they took everything they had and risked that on the CPR. John McDonald advocated for it. And, I'll talk about some other stuff, another time, about him referring to it as the Canadian national dream. But there's a lot going on with that train thing. And, I think it's very relevant to where we're at.
Yeah.
But I'll leave it there, and, it'll give us a lot to discuss next time.
History and the building.
Not next time, but maybe, maybe in a year or so.
Yeah. It'll come about. So my first one is a bit of a not a curveball for you. I know you have an answer for this, but I think
talking to me. Are you?
I'm talking to John.
Hitting me with questions. Okay.
No, it's just one question. It's just one question.
We're talking about some other
kinda. It's still Montreal. The next one will be other but
okay.
I think it should be addressed. The V8 people, they have a decent case. It falls apart pretty easily, but I think this goes back to Ralph Lane and what I said about intentional misdirection. Do you think that the Drummond clue working so well for the beating of the world, especially with the Japanese clue, saying go to the word drum in a dictionary and find something nearby, do you think that's could that be a coincidence, or is that another case of Byron just trying to mess with us with the leg eater on it?
Yeah, I don't know. What I would say is, I believe Forrest Blight was the first person to point that translation out. Beating of the World, Drum, Mons, it's excellent, man. It's really good. I would look at Milwaukee and the way the clues flow.
Yeah.
From start to finish, or start to what we believe is close to the finish. And I would also look at the verse that we just discussed, and you may not believe the first couple lines, but if you have granite walls, where walls is carved in granite, and citadel that's etched in a stone building, that's really tough to argue, right? So
of course,
while Drummond's awesome, I don't know, man. I don't know if it was intentional, right?
Okay, yeah, I guess that
could be coincidence.
You have a good case for it not being right.
Yes,
but
yes.
It's crazy how well it works.
It is.
And the same with Lane for V5 in Roanoke. it's possible
You
he
make
just
a good
overthought
point.
how easy this shit was, right? And like he was like, haha, I'll throw in this little curve, you know, like I don't know. It's too
You know,
good.
I think about people creating puzzles, right? There's nothing that tells us that he created puzzles like this prior to doing these, right? I think his wife mentioned that, you know, he would create like little hunts for their kids, or family, but I don't know if that was before or after or whatever, you know, and I don't know that it was at this level. So the one thing that I will say about any puzzle maker, when you create your first puzzle, the worst thing that could happen is someone solves that thing in 5 minutes, because you're just like, I made a fool out of myself. And that's okay, right? Like I'm getting to the point where some puzzles that I create, I want them done fast, right? Because I want someone to get that gratitude of solving, and it's fun, right? But I think when you start, you have a tendency to question that it's too easy and add some things in to complicate the puzzles.
Yeah.
And this, I can see him deciding to add, you know, we'll make Lane similar over here, or a good answer over in this puzzle, and we'll make Drummond a good answer over in this puzzle. So there's a bit of uncertainty on how to match that verse up, right? It could be 8, it could be 5. It probably could have been a lot of other things, you know, before, you know, you started to, I mean, if you just had the book and like a couple friends, you don't know that where these are connected.
And
you
it's
know,
interesting that it's generally the first line that seems to have this kind of crossover nature to it.
Yeah. What is that like? It's view the 3 stories of Mitchell as you walk the beating of the yeah. So it's right in the beginning. So I think, you know, the more we discuss it, your case for that is really solid, because it does feel like the majority of these, he's placing you in the beginning at some level, right? You know, he's getting you somewhere with those first few lines. So that would be a great area to do some misdirectional type things and have some confusion amongst the verses.
It's just it's very unlikely.
So I answered that. Yeah.
When the Japanese Clue came out, it really solidified that one.
Yeah.
And it was all of a sudden.
But I don't get that. So I do not get that solidifying Drummond, right? Because the only thing I've heard is, oh, some guys like, I looked up the word drum in a dictionary and I found someone named Drummond. Sure. And I'm like, what? Like the dictionaries I used didn't have people in it. Like, what dictionaries are these? You know, is it an encyclopedia that they're looking in? Right, I mean, maybe I'm just mistaken, but he does say dictionary, right?
He says a fairly large dictionary. I can't remember what he tells you to actually look for.
Does he? Maybe I'm just confusing it, but it's a hell of a clue.
It's neither here
or there.
It's a hell of a clue. I think it was just important to cover this because I think a lot of people look at that and go, oh, so V8 is the answer. And it's like, well, I see why you say that, but
that's backwards. You can't use the answer to a riddle as a way to pair the verse to the city.
Yeah.
You would have had to have already paired it before you would have the context to be able to solve the riddles. So that's
a good point.
Kind of is just doing it backwards from my perspective, at least. Cool. And that's the trick.
And then I guess my only other one goes with this, with the whole, what if Wingless Bird sucks? What if any of our answers suck? I saw someone recently post in a thread, a partial solution to these puzzles is most likely a non-solution.
I don't think anyone's calling anything a solution at this point, besides the 7,000 people claiming to have solved something, right? Sure. So I would say the way that I approach these is I want everything that I'm working towards to be a progression of logical thought, right? So I think there should be some interconnectivity to the clues. They don't necessarily have to be linear, as you've seen from other puzzles, but there needs to be a relationship, right? And I don't think that you can take a relationship that's established in this puzzle and discard it based upon finding a couple of random things in a completely different city, right? You have to look at, you know, everything as a whole, right? So the coordinates, the map, the river tying back to Lane, McDonald possibly being in the verse, Stretch, right? But there's interconnectivity going on there. So I agree 100% with that statement, right?
You do.
It's not a solution. It's not a solution, and it never will be. And I think the worst thing someone can do is jump into this verse knowing that you're at the Mount Stevens Club and go, oh my God, there's a white building. Let me find the stone that it's under.
Sure.
You know, it's going to be a little more thought out than that. And by the way, the facade was resurfaced. So if you're trying to dig white stones on the building that are there now, that's not how it looked in 1982. So none of this is a solution, and we're not trying to push solutions.
Fair.
I think we're trying to provide some logical connections, and maybe you'll be the one that finds the solution based on that. And if you do, it's yours, and I congratulate you. But give it some thought and don't harass the club. Don't dig dumb holes. We will not get a ton of shots at digging on that lawn if that's where it is. And I'm not saying that's where it is, but if you approach these people, keep in mind, there are other people that are trying to solve the puzzle to the spot. So when they do dig in that historic area, assuming that the place or the location would be gracious enough to allow it, we don't want to be turned down because someone went nutso and just decided to dig on a whim. Anyone can do that. I know people think that's the way. I still think you can solve it to a little bit smaller area. So,
but I guess that's where I took this quote, a little bit of a rebuttal to you is just, I don't think all the clues still exist. I don't think all the answers will be that we can even answer all the answers anymore. So if someone had
right?
a great beginning and a great end, I would take that over someone who had kind of all of it. And I guess that's my only thought, is just like, I don't feel it necessary to fill in all the gaps all the time, because I think a lot of this stuff might have been lost to time. So that's where, to me, a partial solution might be the solution, and it's not necessarily. But yeah, what about you, Chris?
I mean, a partial solution was true for Boston, but it required a construction crew to dig the whole thing up, right? Like, where can I stand where my back is to the stairs and, you know, some other things might be kind of around, jump right to the middle, which ended up being the end. And, you know, sometimes even a backhoe isn't enough. You got to dig up an entire baseball field to find it. So I don't know if these things are actually going to be found, not just, well, I guess solved, not found. They're going to have to solve. There's a lot more riddle going on here.
That's fair as well. So I like that, because we had pretty much had three completely different interpretations and answers to that.
Yeah. I'll say one more thing. you only need to solve the last part to solve the puzzle. People may not like that, but the way these are positioned right now, anyone could come in and solve like 2 lines and dig up a cask. Sure. So, I mean, you can debate on that, you know, whoever posted that.
Yeah, I just didn't even, man. Yeah, it was one of those things I had it all queued up and I was like, you know what, it's not worth it. And I think it was because of the fact that like, we all took it 3 different ways. Who even knows what that means? Personally, I would take a good endpoint over a good solution.
Yeah. I mean, you can be right for the wrong reason and come out with a cask.
Definitely.
But yeah, so I think that's enough about Montreal.
Yeah, I mean, we made it through what, half of the verse, and I don't even know how long we've been talking, but it's been a hell of a conversation. Yeah, I hope people stuck with us. I hope you know, at least got some ideas out of it. Whether you agree or not, you know, that's entirely up to you. We just want some people thinking, you know, we want these things dug up. You know, my biggest fear is I won't know the answers to the Montreal puzzle when I pass away. So whether you dig it up, I dig it up, if someone digs it up, I'm probably going to start doing some more interesting things with my life and be a happier man. So guys, you know, it's been a blast, man. I appreciate it. I love doing this. You know, I hope people will watch us, you know, stick around. And, you know, if you want us to talk about something, if you have some ideas, you know, put it in the comments. Let's have some dialogues. Let's get thinking on these puzzles.
Cool.
I think that's great.
Awesome. Well, thanks, guys.
All right. Until next time.
All right. Take it easy.
See you, dudes.
Bye.
See ya.